What's up, everyone? We are back at it today with a monster NCAA basketball slate for Saturday, March 2nd. We're going to be posting daily NCAA basketball videos all the way through March Madness, so hit that like button to keep these picks coming and subscribe so you don't miss out on our daily uploads. These picks are sponsored by StumpTheSpread.com, where you can get all of our best picks and predictions on every major sport. While you're here, don't forget to comment below with any questions, opinions, or bets on today's college basketball or NBA slates. I read and respond to every single comment. Let's dive into our first game of the day, number 24 Florida at number 18 South Carolina. Florida comes into this game fresh off comfortable wins over Mizzou and over Vanderbilt. Before that, though, they lost at Alabama. They got kind of blown out in that game. They've been a little bit up and down this season, but it's been mostly up here towards the end of the year. They've won 5 of their last 6 with multiple wins over ranked opponents. They've got a very solid road win at Kentucky. Things have been working out pretty well for the Gators. They've got Walter Clayton putting up 16.8 points per game. They're an elite rebounding team. Their offense is very, very good, ranking them among the top teams in the nation. Their defense could use a little bit of work. They've been up and down on that end. Giving up 74 points to Mizzou isn't a big deal, but giving up 98 points at Alabama, that's not what you're looking to do. Florida's been good against the spread on the road this season, which is a little bit shocking considering their big home court advantage, but they are 5-3 against the spread playing on the road. South Carolina comes into this game playing well. Also, they've won 2 in a row, taking down Texas A&M and Ole Miss, with both of those games being on the road. Before that, though, they did lose at home by a single point to LSU, and they lost at Auburn in an absolute blowout. The Gamecocks don't exactly have those flashy numbers or a big-time leading scorer like we see Florida having, but this team is solid on the boards. They play great defense, so that's definitely a plus for them in this game. Their offensive production is nowhere near the Florida level, but when you look at how they play, their tempo, their style, they've got some big wins of their own. They've won at Tennessee, which is obviously a huge, huge win. They took down Kentucky back when Kentucky was ranked number 6 in the nation. They did get blown out at Alabama, but at this point, we're digging too far back. This could be a little bit of a look-ahead spot, but I don't think you're really looking past the Gators. South Carolina is only a single game back in the SEC. They're 11-4 with Alabama and Tennessee leading the conference at 12-3. Regardless, we're taking South Carolina -2. This is a small lean for us. This isn't going to be one of my bigger plays today, but South Carolina is 9-6 against the spread at home. I think we see Florida kind of come up short a little bit in this game. They've been running pretty hot lately. I think this is where they take a little bit of a dive, and we see South Carolina come out on top. Next up, we've got number 13 Illinois heading to Wisconsin to take on the Badgers. Illinois comes into this game playing pretty good. They just won at home against Minnesota. It was a close, very high-scoring game, 105-97. Before that, they lost at Penn State. Before that, they played a very close game at Maryland. This team is very good. They put up some very gaudy offensive numbers. Their rebounding numbers are great. Their defense is coming around. It's pretty solid, but the real thing to talk about with this squad is Terrence Shannon Jr. He's putting up 21.9 points per game. He's shooting 47% from the field. Very, very solid numbers. We've also got Marcus Domask putting up 15 points and almost 4 assists per game. This team is pretty loaded up and down the roster. Playing on the road this season, they're 5-3-1 against the spread, so not too bad, not at all. But going on the road late in the season, that can always be tough, and in this one, they're going against a very desperate Wisconsin team. The Badgers come into this game fresh off a loss at IU. Before that, they beat Maryland, so that was a very solid win that they desperately needed. They also recently won at home against Ohio State. Wisconsin is only 7-1 against the spread at home this season, but they've been a dominant home team, it feels like. Their rebounding numbers aren't insane. Their defense is very, very good, though. AJ Storr is an absolute monster with his 16 points per game. They had a real chance to knock off Purdue a little bit earlier in the season. Right now, the Badgers have to be getting pretty desperate. That's one of the reasons we're going to go with them. Playing at home, they're -2.5 in this one. I think we see Illinois take a little bit of a step back, playing on the road. In a tough conference game, the Big Ten is not a very forgiving conference to be playing in. Illinois is 2 games back of Purdue, so I don't really think we're going to see them come out on top of the Big Ten. So our pick in this one is going to be Wisconsin to get the win and cover. Next up, we've got one of the marquee games of the day. We've got number 7 Kansas heading to take on number 15 Baylor. Kansas comes into this game fresh off a very tough loss to BYU. They were looking good in the first half, but kind of fell apart in the second half. Kansas has not been putting up that crazy of numbers. They've been a very solid team, but they're only averaging 76 points per game. Their defense is good, no doubt about that, but it's nothing too incredible to write home about. The main news for Kansas right now is the health of Kevin McCullough Jr. I don't think there's any way he's going to play in this game with his bone bruise. This team really relies on him a lot. I mean, the guy's scoring almost 20 points per game. Him being on the sidelines is a huge problem. They shouldn't really care about this game too much. They're not going to be winning the Big 12. It looks like that's probably going to belong to Houston or maybe Iowa State if something weird happens. But Kansas, while they're used to coming out on top in the Big 12, need to be more concerned maybe about the Big 12 tournament, but definitely more concerned about having McCullough Jr. ready to go for the NCAA tournament. Baylor, on the other hand, comes into this game healthy. They're playing pretty well. They just had a comfortable 8-point win playing on the road at TCU. That's a tough place to play. They could have knocked off Houston. That was a tough loss. This team is very good up and down the roster. They play great defense. Their rebounding is good. They're a long, athletic team. They're putting up over 80 points per game, and they're playing at home where they're a very solid 8-5-1 against the spread. Kansas is only 3-5 against the spread on the road, and they're missing their best player. We're definitely taking Baylor to get the winning cover in this one. This could be one of our bigger bets of the day. Next up, we're looking at Oklahoma State heading to Texas. This is something of a rivalry game. Oklahoma State was red hot there for a little bit, knocking off BYU and Cincinnati. They've cooled off, but they have not been getting blown out, guys. They lost by 2 points to Oklahoma and then by 6 points against a suddenly very solid UCF team. The Cowboys are an interesting team. They were so bad early in the season and kind of just turned things around out of nowhere. They've been playing very competitive, very high effort basketball. The Cowboys are 4-4 against the spread when they're playing on the road. Not a bad number at all. Javon Small is a monster. He can run the offense. He's putting up points and assists. This team has been rebounding the ball better lately. Just up and down the roster, they are suddenly a much better team. Texas comes into this game fresh off a solid road win over Texas Tech. They did get absolutely washed by Kansas in the game before that, but when you're playing at Allen Fieldhouse, you're not going to come out on top that often. Texas has a monster in Max Asmus. He's putting up 16 points per game and 4.5 assists. That's pretty solid. Rebounding is a little bit of a weakness for Texas, I would say. Their defense is good. Their offense is solid. Did they think they were going to be 7-8 at this point in the Big 12? I do not think so, but things don't always go the way you think they will in one of the tougher conferences in the nation. Texas is only 5-11 against the spread when playing at home, which is kind of emblematic of them having a struggle of a season. Oklahoma's getting 9.5 points in this one. We're taking Oklahoma State and the points. I think they make this game very close. Do they come away with the win? I don't really think so. I wouldn't necessarily be sprinkling the money line in this one, but I think they find a way to keep this very close, playing against the Longhorns, despite the fact that this is a road game for Oklahoma State. Next up, we've got Duquesne heading to George Mason. Duquesne comes into this game fresh off a solid win over LaSalle. I say solid because they got a comfortable win, but LaSalle is a pretty terrible team. Before that, they lost at Fordham, but before that, they took down SLU. They haven't been playing that tough of a schedule. They did actually play a semi-competitive game at Dayton, but not that competitive overall. This team is not very good on the boards. Their defense is okay. Their offense is pretty mediocre. Day Grant is a solid player, scoring 16 points per game, but he's not very efficient. He's shooting under 40% from the field overall. Jimmy Clark III is a probably more solid offensive option, to be honest. He's putting up 15 points and 4 assists per game. This team is not going to be making the NCAA tournament. They're only 7-8 in the A10. They haven't been able to hang with teams like Richmond, Dayton, Loyola Chicago, VCU. They're looking at the end of a season that is not going to have a postseason. George Mason comes into this game in kind of a similar situation. Their rebounding numbers are very solid. Their defense is much better. Keyshawn Hall is an absolute monster. He's scoring almost 18 points per game, shooting almost 50% from the field. The Patriots just lost at Fordham, so this is definitely a bounce back spot for them. That is not a game they anticipated losing. They did lose a tough one, a definite letdown spot against Loyola Chicago because they got the big upset over number 16 Dayton before that. Duquesne is only 4-5 against the spread when playing on the road, but George Mason is a very solid 8-5-1 against the spread at home. I think we see George Mason come out and cover this 3.5 points, so they're going to get a big statement win in this one. They can't be too happy with how the way their season is going to end, but they are going to get after it. They're going to make a statement and try and position themselves as well as they can for some sort of conference tournament run. Next up, we've got one of the biggest games on the slate. We see number 5 Marquette heading to number 12 Creighton. Marquette comes into this game playing pretty well. They've won 3 in a row. Last time out, they absolutely destroyed Providence. But when your last 3 wins were over Providence, Xavier, and DePaul, you haven't really been playing through the toughest part of the Big East. Before this 3-game winning streak, they went on the road and got absolutely destroyed by number 1 UConn. Obviously, that's the toughest game they could have played at that point in the season, but still, it's a little bit concerning given their overall record against very good teams this year. Marquette is 5-5 against the spread on the road. They have a very solid roster. Jones is a monster. Tyler Kolek is a monster. But their rebounding numbers are really, really scary to me. They're only averaging 33.1 boards per game. And against Providence, they only won the rebounding battle in a blowout by 2 boards. So not feeling super, super hot about Marquette right now. Looking at Creighton, the Blue Jays come to this game fresh off a blowout win over Seton Hall. Creighton's been very good all season long. They are not going to be winning the Big East, obviously, but they're very, very solid. They're putting up nearly 81 points per game. Their rebounding is where I think they really have a huge edge in this game. Their defense is very, very good. This team can really fill it up from deep, especially playing at home. Baylor Shireman is an absolute monster. He's putting up 18 points per game. Trey Alexander runs the offense. He's got almost 5 assists per game, and he's scoring nearly 18 points per game. I honestly think this roster is just better. We've got Creighton at home. They're only -5 in this one. Give me the Blue Jays, where they are awesome. They're a great team at home. They've been very good against elite competition at home. That's why we like Creighton in this one. Next up, we've got Penn State heading to Minnesota. Penn State is coming off of a tough loss at Iowa. The Nittany Lions have not had the season they imagined. They're in the bottom half of the Big Ten. Not that that's a terrible place to be, but they can kind of blame their rebounding. They haven't been very good on defense. They just don't have quite the roster you need to compete in this elite conference. Minnesota, on the other hand, has had a big bounce back season. They are way overachieving given what they've usually done in the conference as of late. They have lost 2 in a row, losing at Nebraska in a blowout and then losing at Illinois in a very close, very crazy game. We see Minnesota coming out on top in this one. They're -6.5, but the Golden Gophers have been absolutely crazy good against the spread at home. They are 17-1 against the spread at home. That's not a trend we can ignore. We're going with the Golden Gophers. We're going with Minnesota to get the win and cover in this one. Next up, we've got number 25, South Florida, heading to Charlotte. South Florida comes into this game on a crazy winning streak. They just took down SMU by 11 points, but now they're about to go on the road where things have been a little bit different. The last time on the road, they almost lost to lowly USTA. This team isn't too good on the boards. Their offense is decent. They don't have an amazing go-to scorer. Selton Miguel is scoring 15 points per game, but we're not exactly going to write home about that one. When we're looking at Charlotte in this game, the 49ers have actually lost 2 in a row. They lost at Memphis and at Tulsa. They're back home for this one. This team plays great defense. They're not very good on the boards either. They don't have a bunch of huge, great go-to scorers, but they have been amazing at home this season. Charlotte is 10-2 against the spread at home. Earlier this season, they blew a 20-point lead against South Florida, so they're going to be out for revenge in this one. I think we see Charlotte come away with the win and cover. They're -3. We like Charlotte a lot in this one. Next up, we got Mississippi State going on the road to take on number 11 Auburn. Mississippi State comes into this game in need of a bounce back after a very, very tough, I would say borderline devastating 2-point loss against number 16 Kentucky. Mississippi State is a very solid rebounding team. Their defense could use some work though, and their offense lacks production. Their leading scorer, Josh Hubbard, is pretty inefficient, shooting under 40% from the field. Looking at Auburn in this game, they are solid. They are in a big bounce back spot though, off a very tough loss. They lost at number 4 Tennessee, obviously an incredibly tough place to play. Auburn's one of the best offensive teams in the nation. They're putting up almost 83 points per game, which is very, very respectable. They've been alternating wins and losses lately. They lost at Florida, then got a blowout win over South Carolina, then lost to number 22 Kentucky, then blew out Georgia, then lost to Tennessee. I think they keep up that trend. They earn the win and cover here. This is a classic revenge game. Auburn's -9. Auburn is 9-5 against the spread and playing at home. Mississippi State is only 2-6 against the spread on the road. Give me Auburn to get the win and cover in this one. Next up, we're going to look at UCLA traveling to take on number 19 Washington State. The Bruins come into this game fresh off a 3rd straight loss. They lost at home to Utah by 1 point. They lost at home to lowly USC. That's a little bit embarrassing. And then they just got blown out at Washington. Now they have to go take on number 19 Washington State. That cannot feel too good for a team that's terrible, terrible, terrible offensively and not so great on defense recently. Washington State comes into this game playing pretty well. They just got a close win at USC. That should be a little bit of a scare. They did have a letdown spot where they lost at Arizona State after winning at number 4 Arizona. This team is very respectable on offense. Their rebounding is good. Miles Rice is a very legitimate leading scorer and runner of the offense. I think we like Washington State in this one quite a bit. They're 8-7 against the spread at home. They're -7 in this one. It's a bounce back spot, I think, for them after a sluggish game against USC. Give me Washington State Cougars in this one. In the last game we're going to look at today, we've got VCU heading to Richmond. VCU comes into this game fresh off a solid win over URI. They've won 2 in a row. They also took down St. Joe's. The Rams have been a good but not insane team all season long. They're 2 games back of Richmond for the top spot in the A10. The A10 has been a very exciting conference this year. Max Shugla is a solid score. He does a good job running the offense. 15 points and almost 4 assists per game. That's nothing to sneeze at. This team not gonna really light up the scoreboard, but their defense is very, very good, and their rebounding is good enough to keep them in games. Richmond, on the other hand, they come into this game playing pretty well. They've won 4 in a row. They just won at SLU. They survived quite the scare against Davidson. They won by only 3 points against a team they should be blowing out. Jordan King is a monster. He's putting up nearly 20 points per game. Richmond is looking to lock up the A10, but I think they could have a tough time in this one. VCU is a very solid 5-2 against the spread on the road. Richmond has been crazy against the spread playing at home, but VCU is +3. They've dominated this matchup. They won in this matchup earlier this season. Give me the Rams +3 on the road in this one. That's all the games we have time for today. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to comment below with any questions or comments about these picks or today's slate, and click the link in the description to check out stumpthespread.com to see all of our top plays. Hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you're enjoying these videos. See you guys tomorrow for more NCAA basketball action.